Frogs can be hypnotized by laying them on their backs and stroking their stomach. Snails can sleep up to 3 years and 3% of ice in Antarctic glaciers is just penguins' urine. This guy's hogging all the facts. No, it's all connected. Pickles are just cucumbers that are pickled. I hate Redditors so fucking much. Where the f did you think they came from? Cucumber turns itself into a pickle. Funniest shit I've ever seen. A philosophy riddle from 1688 was recently solved. If a man born blind can feel the difference between shapes such as spheres and cubes, could he, if given the ability, distinguish those objects by sight alone? In 2003 5 people had their sight restored through surgery, and no, they could not. I love when apparently deep questions turn out to have clear empirical answers. Great apes, including chimpanzees and orangutans, have absolutely no appreciation of music whatsoever. Research has shown they can't tell the difference between Beethoven and Bieber, and that music is all just meaningless sound to them. I love how judgmental this sounds. A dog was revealed in 1908 to be a fake hero. It was pushing children into the river Seine to rescue them and win beefsteaks. Gotta respect the hustle. In 2013 a scientist injected human brain cells into a mouse brain, which improved the mouse's memory and capacity to learn. The split gill mushroom has over 23,328 distinct Shrexes, but they can't all successfully mate with one another. Each Shrex can only be fertile with 22,960 other Shrexes. If Johnny Depp's filming schedule didn't allow for him to be in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Dwayne Johnson would have played Willy Wonka. A lost continent has been found under Europe. It's the size of Greenland and it broke off from North Africa, only to be buried under southern Europe about 140 million years ago. Blood donors in Sweden are sent a text message every time their blood is used to save a life. NBA player Michael Kidd-Gilchrist watches The Lion King once a week because he used to watch it every day with his father until he was 3 years old when his father was shot and killed. Thomas Jefferson's tombstone lists some of his greatest accomplishments, but leaves out the fact that he was President of the United States. The world record for long-distance archery is held by a guy with no arms. Thomas Thwats gave up being human and lived like a goat for 3 days as part of a herd in the Swiss Alps. 2 tablespoons of honey would be enough to fuel a bee's entire flight around the world. There are almost no mosquitoes in Disney World, Florida. Even though it is in a swampy territory abundant with bugs, they have a sophisticated mosquito surveillance program to try and eliminate them quickly. After a woman murdered her husband and attempted suicide, their pet parrot, who was the sole witness, began repeating what's thought to have been their last conversation, including the words, "Don't shoot." In the ancient Roman city of Puteoli there was an octopus that would sneak into kitchens through the sewer and eat pickled fish. Peter Porco, after being hit in the head 16 times with an axe, woke up with his alarm and shaved, prepared breakfast, retrieved a newspaper and made his lunch, all before succumbing to his injuries. There was a baboon named Jack who, for 9 years, helped a man with 2 peg legs switch tracks for trains and never once made a mistake. After the attack on Pearl Harbor, Canada declared war on the Empire of Japan before the United States. Mozart sold the most CDs in 2016, beating out Adele, Drake, and Beyonce, even though all of those artists had Grammy-winning hits that year. In 1923, a jockey suffered a fatal heart attack but his horse finished and won the race, making him the first and only jockey to win a race after death. There are blue Java bananas that can survive the harshest of weathers and taste like vanilla ice cream. There is a place on Earth known as Point Nemo that is so far away from any island or mainland that the closest people to that point are actually the astronauts on the International Space Station. In medieval England, eels were used and accepted, to an extent, as currency, mostly in rental agreements. Many rental agreements, where the landlord would stipulate the rent due in eel currency were found. 25 eels would be a stick, 10 sticks a bind. There was a test several years ago where 70 undercover agents tried to sneak bombs or guns through US airport security. 67 succeeded. The two sides in the Nigerian Civil War agreed to a 48-hour ceasefire to watch Pele when he and his team came to visit Nigeria in 1967. Ants will heal other ants after AIDS, and that mortally wounded ants will refuse treatment. Punk's attorney Phil, the most popular groundhog used for Groundhog Day, has arrest warrants in 3 states, Ohio, New Hampshire, and Pennsylvania, for inaccurate weather predictions. Nepalese farmers create a honey called mad honey, which is produced by bees pollinating rhododendron plants. The honey is psychoactive and its effects can range from euphoria and lightheadedness to being similar to a full-blown acid trip. Guinness modified its filtration process, eliminating the use of isinglass, derived from the dried swim bladders of fish, making its beer officially vegan. The Titanic crew had no binoculars, which may have helped them see the iceberg. They were inside a locker and the key was lost. If you received a blood transfusion with the wrong blood type, a very strong feeling that something bad is about to happen will occur within a few minutes. A US court of law ruled that burritos are not a form of sandwich. In the extinct Australian language Babarum, the word for dog is dog. This is purely a coincidence and there is no relation between the words. In response to Britain sending their convicts to America in the 1700s, Benjamin Franklin suggested sending back shiploads of rattlesnakes to return the favor. When monopoly was introduced to communist Czechoslovakia, private businesses were illegal and mortgages didn't exist, so they turned it into a horse racing variant. Portions of Anne Frank's diary were censored because she described her penis. Submarines have become so stealthy that 2 nuclear-armed and powered subs collided in the Atlantic Ocean without detecting each other. The Hollywood sign was modified to read Hollywood after some pranksters added $50 of fabric to it on January 1, 1976. Despite increases in computer power, each Shrek movie has taken about twice as many hours to render as the one before it. DreamWorks calls this Shrek's Law. In the 1940s, baseball umpires were called guessers. Anyone who questioned their calls were known as second guessers, which is how the word second guess was introduced to the English language. George Washington and his compatriots once ran up a bar tab that would be close to $15,000 in modern currency. The 7 kingdoms from Game of Thrones are based on a real period of British history called the Heptarchy. 2,000-year-old seeds were discovered inside an ancient jar in Israel in 1963. They were planted in 2005 and a tree extinct for 1,800 years sprouted from the ground. Although they spend 16 hours a day in water, hippos can't swim because they are too muscular and sink. Instead they just run around under the surface. George Washington had a fear of being buried alive. He requested, if he died, his body be laid out for 3 days before burial to make sure he was dead before burial. At the height of the space race, the US planned to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon as a display of America's Cold War muscle. Queen Elizabeth II was a mechanic and truck driver during World War II. She's the only female from the royal family in British history to join the armed services. A Minnesota man once sprayed toilet papering teens who were on his property with a squirt gun full of fox urine. During the Prohibition era, the US government allowed whiskey to be sold through pharmacies. As a result, Walgreens grew from 20 retail stores to almost 400. On Air Force One, commemorative packs of red, white, and blue-colored M&Ms are given to guests in lieu of cigarette boxes. This was due to Nancy Reagan's request to ban smoking on Air Force One in 1988. The Pokemon franchise has generated approximately 3 times as much money as Harry Potter. Owls can't move their eyes in their sockets, making their 180-degree neck turning necessary to see around them. During the Battle of the Bulge, German troops who could speak English were airdropped behind Allied lines while wearing American uniforms to cause confusion for the Allies. In 2010, an octopus from Germany named Paul would predict how every game in the FIFA World Cup would go. He ended up being 100% correct with every choice he made. The Secret Service agent who saved President Reagan's life joined the Secret Service after seeing a movie starring Ronald Reagan as a Secret Service agent. The Toyota Matrix's odometer has a glitch where it stops at 299,999 miles, technically making it a glitch in the Matrix. Caesar salad isn't Italian and has nothing to do with Julius Caesar. It was invented in Mexico in 1924 by a man called Caesar Cardini. The Vietnamese word for shark literally translates to fat fish, and the Afrikaans word for stapler literally translates to paper vampire. The Beatles album, Abbey Road, was originally going to be called Everest, but none of the Beatles wanted to fly to the Himalayas to take a photo, so they just called the album Abbey Road. The question mark, exclamation mark, punctuation mark has an actual name. It's called an interrobang, or the interrobang, and it's to be written as: only 16% of millionaires inherited their fortune, 47% made it through business, and 23% got it through paid work. The Church of Scientology gained its tax-exempt status by having its members sue thousands of individual IRS employees, forcing them to all have to take time off to consult with lawyers and go to court, effectively shutting down the IRS and forcing them to give in to Scientology's demands. In an arousal study of straight men, only the homophobic men showed an increase in penile erection to male homosexual stimuli. The USA paid more for the construction of Central Park than it did for the purchase of the entire state of Alaska. Animals re-evaluate what they experience during the day in their sleep and thereby secure knowledge, meaning they have dreams as complex as humans. The daughter of the first interracially married couple in Mississippi is a lesbian who fought for marriage equality. Rabbits were domesticated due to Pope Gregory the Great ruling that young rabbits were not classified as meat so Christians could eat them during Lent. A reporter who wrote stories about a serial killer was actually the serial killer himself. Jellyfish will almost disappear if left out in the sun, because they are 98% water. They mostly evaporate into thin air. Paul Rudd and Jeffrey Dean Morgan own Samuel's Sweet Shop, a candy store in Rhinebeck, New York, which they saved from closing after the passing of its previous owner, a friend of theirs. Colorblind people can see the differences in texture and brightness more intensely than normal people, and were even used in World War II to spot camouflage. Natalie Portman not only co-authored a paper called Frontal Lobe Activation During Object Permanence, Data from Near-Infrared Spectroscopy, but that her birth name is Hirschlag. There was a period in the 17th century called the Little Ice Age in which the Earth cooled, causing severe winters for 70 years. There is a group of people in Greece that developed a language of whistling to communicate long distances while sheep herding. The ghosts in Pac-Man had distinct movement patterns. The red ghost chases Pac-Man, the blue and pink ghosts corner Pac-Man, and the orange ghost chases Pac-Man sometimes and goes in the lower left corner randomly sometimes. Turtles can feel things that touch their shell, yet can't feel pain through their shell. Paul Bettany was told by a movie producer that his career was over and he was done in Hollywood. As he sat down in the sidewalk minutes later, Joss Whedon called him and asked if he wanted to be Vision in Age of Ultron. Martin Luther King Jr. started a pillow fight in the hotel room with other civil rights leaders in the hour before he was assassinated. A deer poacher in Missouri is sentenced to watch Bambi once every month during his year-long prison term. Tom Brady asked Bill Belichick for permission to visit Disney World after winning their first Super Bowl. "Of course you can go," Belichick said. "How many times do you win the Super Bowl?" Chickens can be hypnotized, put into a trance, by holding down their heads and drawing a straight line on the ground. The record chicken hypnosis is 3 hours 47 minutes.